Hello and welcome to the Yetti Den. This is the podcast called Tactically Sound. I'm your host Spencer, and today I'm joined by my really good friend Matt, otherwise known as JumbyJumbwa. Matt, how are you doing today?
I am solid, bro. I'm so good. Thanks to you, dude. First week I was streaming Oblivion, and because of you I now have it on my PC, so thank you so much, Spencer. A round of applause. I'm actually playing it correctly now. Full on mouse and keyboard. Made a new character, and it was I would actually say I enjoyed my new first playthrough. It was a much better experience than streaming. Can't believe I was doing that.
Well, yeah, so I guess it's something to do. I'll have to, don't quote me, but in one of the documentaries that I made on Bethesda, Josh Scheuer was talking about the PlayStation 3 tech with the creation engine, and there was just a lot of issues. So streaming the PlayStation 3 port is wild. And I did the same when I played Skyrim on the PlayStation 3. Apparently that was a really lackluster port. I had no idea, because in 2011 when I was playing that game, I was more of a big time open world kind of action game fan. I wasn't even super aware of Dungeons and Dragons. I wasn't aware of game engines, any of that. That was all more recently that I've been into that. So I didn't know that I was getting the lesser experience of Skyrim by playing it on PlayStation 3. So I didn't know about frames and latency.
Ignorance is bliss, Spencer.
Right. And then you're a PC player. You're a mouse and keyboard guy, right? That's kind of how you...
I mean, my first way of gaming, just like you, was PC as a kid.
Right.
And then I did end up switching to Xbox, and then, GameCube, right? Consoles. Yeah. And then I finally went back to PC after being convinced by my brothers for probably about 8 years of convincing me that to switch back console to PC. And I'm so thankful, coming from more of a PlayStation background, more in my college years, to getting a PC, because I was saying in previous episodes, I am so glad I'm not missing out on some of those Microsoft Xbox titles, right?
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting, seeing our habits, how they form young, growing up playing on a PC. And I never had a gaming PC. I just had the family PC, and somehow I got lucky enough to where I could run Morrowind. I had MAME Arcade, which was my friend gave me. I didn't even know what it was, but I would play Metal Slug on there.
Nice.
And then I played Age of Empires, and then I would play all the hardcore stuff on my friend's computer. We'd play Half-Life and Delta Force and all that stuff. But so I'm playing on Xbox now. You're playing on PC.
Yes.
And even with Morrowind, when I found out that it was on Xbox, I immediately switched over to Xbox, because I just wanted to see what it felt like playing on console. That's something that's still true to this day for me, where I do like buying the same game on different platforms and just seeing if you get a different experience out of it. So I'm glad that you're already getting to taste Oblivion in two different ways.
It's
streaming
beautiful.
On PlayStation Now, or what's it called now? PlayStation Plus?
PlayStation Plus, yes.
Okay, PlayStation Plus. So yeah, you got to experience it on streaming the PlayStation 3 port versus now the PC port. And what's the clickiness of it? Does it feel like you're getting good frames? Are you checking that? Is it reactive to you, or?
Well, you never played Kingdom Hearts 2, did you, Spencer?
No.
Well, I'll describe it to you really quick, the intro. In the intro of the game, Sora is regaining his memories. And in these cutscenes, they purposely make it look like you're watching an old TV. Remember old TVs, how they would kind of look staticky and some screen tearing? You can almost see the frames, click, 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 frames, right? That's what it looked like while streaming. And then even in those cutscenes in Kingdom Hearts, they would literally even have screen tears, just like my experience streaming Oblivion. So yeah, it was pretty bad.
But on PC now, it's way faster, right? You're not noticing.
Yeah, and this is so fitting, talking about what we're talking about today, visuals. It actually looks crisp. The textures are smooth. I can actually see some textures now. And I'm actually getting a sense of atmosphere and environment because I'm not being distracted by movements anymore, literally.
Right.
Yeah, it's night and day for me.
Yeah, so I'll kind of explain, today we are on our second episode. You don't have to watch them in order, but if you want to, you can. But this is our second episode on Oblivion. Matt and I have never played it, but we're going to do a deep dive as kind of like our first impressions as we go through the game, discovering for the first time what we like about it, what our critiques are. And so today we're going to be talking about, it's a blend of like the art direction, but also the setting, because I think those two go hand in hand. So
right.
I don't see this so much as like how we're interacting with the world, but more how is the world presented to us. So like, meaning when you were looking a little closer at some of the assets, some of the UI choices, all the different ingredients that make Oblivion look the way that it looks from a more of an art direction standpoint, I want to unpack that. So we'll start with just the font. I love fonts, and I like YouTubers who like fonts. So that would be for me like Rick Beato. He's a music YouTuber, but he'll talk about what kind of fonts he likes to use and why he uses them and all that. Same with I feel like Wolf Den is also a font guy, but you can kind of tell when you find a channel where you're like, oh, they're really obsessed over the fonts. So I was just curious, like, I didn't have an Xbox 360, but I'm playing it on Xbox Series X. And so I'm seeing like the Xbox 360 button prompts, but then I'm also seeing probably what you see, which is, the font, which I saw on the unofficial Elder Scroll pages, is called King Things Pet Rock. And It's got kind of this like kind of medieval look to it. And what I've noticed is when you go to Skyrim, I want to say it starts modernizing, right? They start going to like slicker fonts. Let's see, Skyrim UI.
Right.
Because in a way it becomes more of a adult looking game. And I was curious how you feel about that, because I captured some footage for another video from Morrowind, and it has a very kind of square Windows looking, retro computer RPG look to it that I love. Now, this one has more of a UI to it in a way where it's like, it feels like, we're looking at pieces of paper with ornamental things. And that is a little bit in Morrowind, but that's really, to me, not in Skyrim. So I want to take all of these different components of the UI and just talk about, is that the thing that draws you in, or do you prefer more of a modern? So just give me like an overall take when you see some of the screenshots that I have of my playthrough of like, the font, you have these symbols, like they're like hand-drawn symbols that are the different sections of the UI. You have the compass. How do you feel about this more medieval take on a UI?
I would say let's start off with what I like. I love the symbols that you were just referencing in the UI. I think those look very cool and fun and different. The only games that I feel like I've recently played that have leveraged this again are games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, where they're purposely referencing these medieval time periods. This one feels, a little bit different because this is a fantasy world, right? And which is kind of cool, but like at the same time, like when I first saw this text, I immediately felt like what I want to say. I immediately felt like Sleeping Beauty. Like the intros to the old Disney films that are very fairy tale-esque. It reminded me of that. So yeah, I definitely got a kid vibe from it. But what's funny about kids is they don't read text. So it's like my inner kid brain that I can access still, it was going like skip, kind of thing too. So it didn't quite grasp my attention, but what it did was give me a feeling, right? And so that fairy tale feeling. And I think that carry over well and translated well to, if we want to move in next to like the images, the pictures, that the art that we see as you're building your character, choosing what class you want, the gods and stuff. That it matched for me that fairy tale vibe that I was getting from the text, which was very nice to see that consistency for me.
Right. I was so glad you said that, because the Banner Saga, which is one of my favorite RPGs, was inspired by the artist that did Sleeping Beauty, and then also the artist that did the animated Lord of the Rings. And so that kind of, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'm thinking like heraldry and, you know, like these very decorative fonts and these scrolls. I just think that's a really cool aesthetic if it matches the rest of the game. And I think they do a pretty good job of staying true to that. And so, you know, I think we've progressively seen UIs, especially at Bethesda, become less charming and more minimalist. And probably that's to try and let players imagine their own world and interact with the game itself. But I think you do lose a little bit of charm when you do that to a certain extent, because I think, you know, it was even funny watching, and I think that's Bethesda's strength and Bethesda's weakness. Their strength is that they go, okay, remember when we did Daggerfall? Well, now we're going to make it more serious and like more realistic. Here's Morrowind. Then they go from Morrowind. Now we're going to make it more serious, more realistic. Here's Oblivion, and then to Skyrim. And so that's kind of scares me a little bit, because what if that means Elder Scrolls 6 is like so adult that it's like you don't get that weird kind of factor, you know?
What do you mean by so adult? Like, are you thinking about like them going towards more like in a way hyper realism, even in simulator like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption 2? You think like more in that kind of route? Realism? I would
definitely say Red Dead Redemption 2 would be a good one to look at, because I know Todd loves Rockstar.
Oh.
So I think I can't picture them, and I could be wrong, I hope I'm wrong, I can't picture them designing Elder Scrolls 6 going, I want people to reference Sleeping Beauty and like you know, old school computer RPGs. I can't picture them saying that. And I think that's something that Diablo has done really well. I think Diablo 4, when I'm playing that game, it feels like it has a design language that's pretty, and I know for hardcore Diablo fans, like this probably doesn't ring true for them because they know the nuances, and probably as I go back and play the old ones, I'll see those differences. But as like a casual fan looking in, playing Diablo 4, I love all of the aesthetics of the game, and I think that it still has that like medieval fantasy charm. Like I don't feel like it's lost. I think whenever they get a chance to show you that, they're showing you that. And even some of their like loading screens remind me of old school Bethesda loading screens, where it's like these really, I put in Ultima photos in our thing because Todd used to play Ultima. It's that like fantastical kind of almost goofy looking, you know, like 70s, 80s Dungeons and Dragons art style.
I love that,
and I
art
think,
style.
I think that Baldur's Gate 3, I haven't played it yet, but what I've seen, it looks like they kind of understand that pretty well. Yep. People want to walk in. It's like if you're walking into a theme park, you want to be able to guess a little bit about how that park's going to feel. Like you kind of like when you see Star Wars, it's so fun to see how do they translate the design language of our world with the design language of the Star Wars world. And I hope that when they design Elder Scrolls UI, that they go, how do we make them kind of get that satisfaction of, oh, wow, this button click feels like I'm in Elder Scrolls. Not so much it feels like I'm in any other Bethesda game, right? Like I want it to feel like Elder Scrolls, not feel like Fallout, and not feel like Skyrim. And I know that Todd has said he does want every game to be distinct. So I hope that the distinctness, that they look back on some of the old games and go, it's okay to evolve in technology, but you shouldn't evolve past the feeling that you give players, right? Like so much so that they're going to other games to become immersed because you're giving them, like, we don't want just vanilla, we want all of the flavors, right? And so that means they have to choose an aesthetic, right? And it's just not common for modern UIs to have these types of things because they are confusing. There are definitely downfalls from a player perspective of these like cryptic looking UIs.
Yeah.
I have to study the screenshots and like stare at them and be like, okay, so that's like a compass measuring thing. So is that the map? But then what's that other circle? And then what's the hand with the goblet? And then what's the single goblet? And then what's the 3 goblets? But that's also part of the charm and part of the fun. Right. But that's not what casual players probably want. They'll be so pissed navigating a UI like this.
It reminds me of back in the day with other games like I'm thinking of Fable 3, where the whole UI was actually just an interactive room you teleported to. And you would have to like, it was like cool an idea. Like, you know, I think Oblivion
theory,
executed their UI better, but because at least it's just a menu. but for Fable 3, they made it a room, like your home base is your pause menu basically, and you actually have to walk up to your mannequins to click on the armor that you want, or to get your sword or your axe to switch weapons. So it was cool in the idea of like, here's your home base, you're Batman, you know, but then you're actually just getting ripped out of the game because like now you're having to pause, go walk and find that the room that has all your weapons and go pick your axe, and then you finally can quit out of there again instead of just quickly like Skyrim or something, or even Oblivion, where you can just like go scroll, find your weapon, click, you got it really quickly, right? So I think they're just we're in this day and age, they were just really experimenting with how can we're making a new video game, how can we have our own unique UI system of how to play with this game. And I think after all this experimenting, people just kind of found something that stuck, because like I feel like a lot of RPGs now these days have similar UI experiences.
Which I don't love that, but I also understand you're trying to remove frustration, right?
Right.
I was looking at this, one of our screenshots here, that basically it's like a pen and paper callback in a way. It's kind of like you have a piece of paper in front of you and their hand drawings. Like there's just a charm to that I hope they don't lose. I was trying to figure out why these hues of green, blue, red, because to me that part of the UI stands out. It doesn't look old. It's like these kind of, and you know what I think it is? Are those the colors on an Xbox 360 controller for the buttons?
Oh, yes. Not brown, but like green, blue.
Like, right.
There's yellow.
Okay.
I think it's green, blue, yellow, red.
Right. So I wonder if it was kind of because I think Morrowind and Oblivion had really big launches on the Xbox systems, and then they would come later to PlayStation. I don't think Morrowind ever went to PlayStation, but I wonder if there was kind of a baking into the aesthetic of like what, because I'm pretty sure, don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure Oblivion came out like 10 months after Xbox 360 launched, and it was a really big deal. So they would have already seen what the console looks like, and of course any developer would, but like the controllers are already in people's hands. I wonder if this is a way to kind of subtly tie in the Xbox branding into the UI, because that's the one thing I would change is, and I know I'm really particular about design, but like I don't like the kind of elementary school marker primary color look of the blue that they use on the text so often, versus you see that like the thief and the way they draw everything else is very kind of mature in a classic D&D sense.
I think where you're getting at is, you know, we grew up in the 90s with like the birth of Microsoft Paint and just Word, and we had the weirdest, most simple websites that like where a child can make it way better now these days, you know? and they would have only primary colors like green, like this green or this blue or this red or black, right? And so naturally looking at this, coming from that reality, you're just like, this looks lackluster. This looks like Office Space, like dead in a way. And they could have done something else with it. But I could see them sitting in that Office Space or their business, Bethesda, going, like, what colors did they have back in the day? Like they had primary colors. They had a royal blue. They had a bloody red. Like these are the colors they use. And then, but when you compare that to what we're going through, right, with like birth of computers and internet and websites and what colors are visible on our screens, it kind of lost that translation onto a digital screen for me.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, the blue looks off, but that's really my only complaint. I think if that was like a white text, like if you blended modern with this era and kind of got something in between, I think I would have no notes. Like I love the way that this looks.
Well, have you seen Kingdom Come Deliverance UI at all?
Yeah, I was looking at it when you said that, and it kind of has a good blend of a slightly more modern, but still has some of the charm. And that's the thing when you're doing medieval. As many cool illustrations and paintings and watercolor and all that stuff that you could incorporate, I think that makes it way more immersive. Right. I don't like when everything is like has to be 3D modeled, like modern looking, realistic. I love seeing the charm. We can move on to, for instance, I have my class, the rogue, and the drawing of that rogue is so cool because it's very specific. Like, and I think that's okay. That it's like a card, like a trading card.
Yes.
It's got that like classic look where I know I can make my rogue however I want, but it's almost like a tarot card kind of playing card, or it has a really cool charm to it. And I'm sure it's a lot of work, having artists hand draw all of this stuff. But I think it makes a huge difference in the charm.
Yeah, it has so much charm. You're right, and it immediately gives you a feeling when playing this game, atmosphere, and I feel like that was so important for this generation because they couldn't fully express the art styles they wanted to graphically, and so it kind of reminds me of this is like the age in time where gunpowder was discovered and we're starting to see like knights have even some sort of musket in their hand, but like we're not really using them yet, they hadn't fully developed the ability to sell an art style. Well, arguably, I would say some games like Mario or Legend of Zelda sold their art style really well for their medium, but I think with what they were trying to do in Oblivion was tell more of a deeper, more mature universe, like a Tolkien-esque. And what do these universes all have in common? Is they're a blend of a lot of different mediums all together to create this world. And in Skyrim, you see that through all the literature, all the books you can read, the history, the libraries, the scrolls, and even some of the symbols and the statues and art there. And you see it more graphically in the world because they could do it. But here, like right off the bat, I'm already seeing it through setting up my character, the UI, and it's creating that, like you said, like Sleeping Beauty, Tolkien, this kind of, I'm in a new world. I've escaped to this world, Oblivion, right? Really cool.
Yeah, and an RPG, you spend a lot of time in the menus, so having the menus feel charming. And also there's this psychological trick that happens with this kind of UI where you're sitting in your room with a controller staring at a TV screen, but it feels like it works. Like I feel more like I'm playing a pen and paper, like I'm using my brain. Right. It doesn't feel like I'm staring at the same kind of UI that I would on like Netflix and Amazon. And
would you say this feels more? Oh, sorry. I was going to say, would you feel this more? It sounds like you were getting to like Dungeons and Dragons, pen and paper. So would you say absolutely. This feels more true to like classic pen and paper RPG versus what we now see from Skyrim or even later Bethesda RPGs?
Yeah, I think that, these developers probably grew up playing D&D and then wanting to translate that into a game. And then the games themselves became more popular than the inspiration. So then it was about keeping the players immersed in the world, because how you sell a game like this is the immersion, the detail. Everyone jokes about, I forget, I don't know the joke, but there's a joke about Todd Howard saying like 10 times the detail or something like that, every time or whatever. And I think that we're past that now. We don't need the detail. We need the charm. We need the art. We need the uniqueness, the mystery, even looking at, I have I want to say, what are these? The major and minor skills. They're almost like tattoos. They're very quirky. But it's cool because it just has an aesthetic, It's like old school skateboards. We were talking about skateboards earlier, but it's like the art on a skateboard is one of my favorite things to look at. When you see those, the fingerboards, what are those called? Tech decks. Yeah. Like
get like a flame boy.
Yeah. All those characters, my friends and I loved collecting the stickers, knowing all the characters, and it was just huge. And I think every time you're presenting a piece of bland information that's kind of just numbers and descriptions, if you could add a cool piece of art to it that conveys a deeper, richer history in the world, I think that adds so much for the player experience. Not just seeing pictures of my character. I don't need my character to be the avatar for everything in this world. You could picture a modern UI being like, when it's mysticism, your player would just go into a magic pose. And then when it's restoration, they're like healing. I don't need that. I kind of like seeing, who are these two like Greek looking goddesses talking to each other? What is that symbol there? Is that the symbol from the game cover? I think who's that person in the water? It's a mythological kind of.
They literally
approach,
all look like art pieces, dude. Like, what the heck? They're literally all art pieces. Like, I would turn into like my high school teacher. Like, I spent a month on this. It's you know what it made me think of is like, what do they do now? They just have like symbols, like really simple symbols next to things now to label
everyone
things.
Kind of went minimalist, right? Because they got embarrassed when you look at your history and go, oh yeah, look at how cheesy our UI is, or look at this, we made it better, we've made it more minimalist, it's more like Apple, it's more like stuff that you're used to looking at in your world. But I think we need to go back to this, because as our lives become more digital, we need ways for our brains to immerse ourselves in it's like, I don't know, the old school paper, like experiencing that, seeing that texture, that transports me more than a super modern UI over a fantasy game.
Totally.
So if they could find ways to bring some of this charm back, because I wasn't a huge fan of the Skyrim UI. Like, that was something that I was bummed out about, because I missed Oblivion. I came from Morrowind, and I was like, whoa, it's a little like, I understand the value of simplicity in other mediums or other IPs, but with Skyrim, I would have loved to see, and I'm sure there's a mod that like mods it to look classic. That would be sick. That actually is a mod I would be tempted to use. I'm such a purist of like
it is a mod.
Vanilla.
I've already seen it.
Yeah, and this is what everyone's talking about, which I'm so glad. Everyone's talking about their frustration with achievement breaking mods, and so I'm like, once you guys figure that out, I'm all in. I'm also all in for these like expansions, Sky Oblivion, the Morrowind, Skywind, all that stuff. I will totally hop into. But I'm always scared to like tweak it until I have the achievements, and I want to first study the developers so we could have these conversations, and not be like, oh, I don't remember what it looks like because I modded everything. I'm just more of a nerd in that way of like studying how we got here.
What do you think about this? Because this could potentially change, like, how Bethesda likes to re-release games, remaster them, right? And then it's very common for the mod scene to be like, no, we didn't like that change, right? So something that I've recently seen comes from Kingdom Hearts 2, again, on Steam. They recently implemented AI visual texture corrections throughout the game. So they used AI to upscale textures, the graphics, in Kingdom Hearts 2. And what people are starting to say is like, now some of these textures that were, maybe painted or made to show some sort of dimension are now being smoothed out and becoming more flat. And so it makes me think like this is probably one of their guinea pig testing to see how everyone's probably watching them to see how the fan base reacts to these changes, these updates, because they just roll out this update, you download it, download that update. Now your game looks different, even if it's just marginally different.
I think the same thing was being said for the Tomb Raider remaster, is that everything kind of gets washed over with this like AI filter that smooths everything out. And so, I think as outside looking in, we see these big technical shifts as how they're marketed to us as consumers, right? So the big buzzword being AI, it's like, oh, AI this, AI that, but that existed in other creative mediums, meaning there was a point in the audio industry when it was like, we're going digital, we're going to do it all in Pro Tools, right? But the thing is, then Pro Tools starts to have a sound, or, oh, now we're all using Splice, but there's a bunch of social media going around of the big song by Sabrina Carpenter, Espresso, is like 2 loops that anyone could get from Splice. So now Splice is going to have a sound. At one point, everyone had Waves plugins, and Waves has a sound. It was the CLA vocal. The thing is, consumers are catching up to the innovators of the technology. So consumers are spotting those AI filters. I even noticed it on Instagram. I'll take a picture of my dogs and then I'll slide just the first filter and it does this like smoothing effect. And I was like, oh my God, that's basically what AI filtering looks like. It's this like smooth, or also you can even see it on our cameras. If you bump the sharpness a little too sharp, you'll see these really fake black lines that go, because it's like artificially enhancing. And so you get these artifacts, right?
Right.
So just like people make fun of, which I don't think is a fair thing to do, but like those, when they listen to music of a generation, they'll be like, oh, that cheesy synthesizer, that cheesy snare drum. Well, they're going to say that about our AI filters. They're going to be like, man, these people thought this looks good. Look at that obvious artifact. Look at that. Like they destroyed, like what did they do to my boy, Kingdom Hearts? Like they ruined it. They're going to say that about a lot of these filters because the human eye is so hard to trick, right? And so as soon as people get a lot of something, they automatically trash it. So I think that exists already in a ton of emulators and mods, is like the filter, the smoothing, the anti-aliasing, the upscale. Doesn't mean it's bad to give people the option, but I just hope that the label of that being considered AI goes away. Like it's like, let's just call it what it is. You're smoothing textures out, or like you're artificially enhancing something, and maybe under the hood there is some component of AI, but it's too broad of a term for all of these cheesy filters that we're going to be able to spot. We're going to be like, oh, that's that cheesy filter from that game engine. Oh, this one used that upscaler. And we're going to become really protective.
It's so lazy.
I get that there's a value to enhancing textures. Like there's a Morrowind NVIDIA video where they take all the assets, and I think you have to like do it yourself. And I don't know if that's considered what you're talking about, but it's like literally up-resing the individual things, and maybe I don't know if that's different from what you're talking about.
I'm okay with like upscaling, like full on. Like I'm importing like with The Witcher. Like I imported a bunch of new textures, upscale textures, where people are actually spending time designing these textures, or even for like modding Skyrim, people are crafting these textures. They're not. Maybe they could have used some component of AI to get there, but like there's still an artistic, creative process happening behind the scenes that is having a human brain designing that texture. This
and
is
protecting
like
the charm,
a filter, like you were saying, like just press
like
a
the
button.
Instagram one where you just slide it and it's like, whoa, like because once you like take a picture of yourself and leave the, well, first of all, what it'll do is the phone will like process, right? The AI, whatever it is, I don't know if it's an AI, but it's like Mo and I will take a picture of ourselves and we'll joke, like, let it bake for a couple minutes. because first you see what the camera looks like. It's like normal to our eyes because we're used to seeing an iPhone camera, and then it processes it and it like adds sharpness. It like tweaks the shadows. It does what it thinks the image is supposed to look like. And then you let it sit there for a while, and then it starts to go in between that really harsh shift and what you initially saw, and it starts to look a little bit more normal. And so we joke, like, we'll like look at it like, oh, that's cute, and then we'll see it process real quick. It'll be like there's like some latency. We're like, oh god, it made our skin look like gray, and it does something weird with your eyes. It like makes them look really dead. And some engineer somewhere was like, oh, this new tech is going to look awesome. But the thing is, our eyes catch up to that because we see each other in real life, but also there's a style that we adjust to as, consumers. It's like, oh, I like the way this lens looks. I like the way this camera looks. And even it goes further with Hellblade. There's a discussion of players complaining about, I think it's called like chromatic abrasion or something that has to do with the lenses that they're emulating. And so it goes so many layers deep where it's not just AI or not AI. It's, does that particular tool and that particular result create a human connection to the artwork? Right. And so some developers are like, no, I want the camera to have a little bit of motion blur because it's supposed to look cinematic. And gamers are going to have their own opinions depending on the game, right? And what the expectations are of that game. So yeah, if someone just, and that's why I bought an Xbox too. Like I bought an Xbox because it upscales the resolution and it adds frame boost and it does all this stuff. So I am not the person to talk to for that stuff, but I do find it fascinating because I'm just learning about it now by watching Digital Foundry like everybody else. So I can speak on it from like an art direction and using the tools in non-video game stuff, but I don't know the specifics enough, like what's the hardware on the Xbox doing versus what you're talking about versus the modder who's lovingly crafting the textures to maintain the charm but have a proper resolution.
Right. And I'm all for the mod scene, the modding community. Make your game play how you want it to play and look how you want it to look. That's awesome and that's cool. So if you do want like a smoother look, like you said, I'm glad it's there for those people. But this episode we've been talking about atmosphere and what kind of ideas and feelings are invoked from these visuals. And I was just looking at some of these pieces of artwork and just imagining a filter being thrown over them and just how much that would change the way I would feel about the UI and my experience. I might think something else, and that's a little bit worrisome and I was thinking in terms of Kingdom Hearts, and like for some people they don't ever want to mod and they don't want to ever want to mess with their files and programs, and if you're going to force on them this upscaling in a way, right? That kind of sucks because people are fans of what they originally bought, and it becomes nostalgic over time, and having the option of not keeping it how it was when you bought it kind of sucks to me.
Yeah. So we'll now kind of talk about like the towns. I've only seen a couple towns. We're not going to go too much into our gameplay. We'll probably do that in future episodes. I've seen a couple towns, and it's fun discovering new Elder Scrolls towns. Like that's been really cool for me.
Right.
It's like, oh shoot, what is that town over there? I'm curious to see what it's like. And I was describing them as like shrubbery. It has a lush vibe. There is an Oblivion gate. Yeah, you see that early on is like the Oblivion gate, but then there's an idyllic meet Blizzard kind of vibe, I would say, with like some of these towns and villages, also kind of like Kingdoms of Amular. And then in a way, it kind of reminds me of like a JRPG medieval town. Like as I'm like going through some of these towns, they have this like, I could vacation here. I could
like Dragon's Dogma in a way.
Yeah, kind of like, but I think these are even more Dragon's Dogma towns. I didn't feel like I'd be safe staying in the towns. I wasn't like, ooh, they're a little grimier in my opinion, at least what I saw. But some of these, like the screenshot I have, it's like it looks cozy. It kind of reminds me of the little bit that I played of like Dragon Quest 11 or Fire Emblem. It reminds me more of like those kinds of charming, sweet towns, you know, like there's not a lot of grime from what I'm seeing. I'm sure there's other towns that we'll discover that have more of that. But if I were to like see this and imagine a remaster, I would hope that we were talking about upscale the textures through the remastering process of like whatever Night Dive did to Quake 1, the Quake 1 remaster and the Quake 2 remaster, where it's like you could kind of flip it on, flip it off. You could see all the ways that they fixed, like not fixed, I think that's a bad word, but like the ways that they added new modules for you to enhance. Like, oh, you add this type of lighting effect, add these types of particles, add this type of, you know, with what I saw as I was capturing gameplay, I was thinking maybe like add more shadow detail to Oblivion, maybe keep the same charm of the textures, but close up some of the seams so it's not so clearly like patterned, you know, rocks that are repeating, you know, fix some of the pop in, but keep the overall aesthetic of that time. Totally. In place.
For me, it's like keeping this. So for like overall look of like these towns and the setting, like I immediately felt because of the drawings, the art style we're seeing in the UI, again, fairy tale. Like I feel like I'm walking into Snow White.
Yes.
They have lower resolution textures, but that's just the time period. If they were to make a remake like you were talking about, I imagine something like a remake like Final Fantasy VII, but maybe not going as hard of a realism route, right? More leaning into fairy tale, more leaning into Kingdoms of Avalar or Amalur, something like that.
Is it Amular?
Amular, something like that. You guys know what we're talking about, because that game has like cool fairy tale Western RPG vibes too, and also a little bit more animated because or like kid friendly, because what's interesting about Oblivion for me is like the whole world seems like nice fairy tale, the Shire in a way, especially when you walk out, but everything you're experiencing and even the characters' voices and their voice acting is like a life and death situation, super thrilling, dark, crazy crap is happening in this world. And it's like totally opposite of what it looks like. But I think that's part of the world's charm, right, Spencer?
Right. Yeah. I discovered, I like walked into this statue and was like, oh, this is perfect. This is the type of art direction I'm talking about, where like, it doesn't have to be something that it's not, meaning like it didn't have to be super high resolution for me to appreciate it. Just the art style of like the pose of the statues, there's something mysterious about it, something mythic. It makes you ask questions. It makes you want to dig more into the lore, understand all of that. And I think that's what Bethesda does best, when they focus on the art and the lore together, implying this like existing, deep, long, ancient world that you're uncovering. I think they do that really, really well. Also, I added like the paintings and rugs because when you play Fallout 4, you start thinking like a game developer, where they show you all the items, and that to me pulls me out a little bit. I wish that there was a way to turn that off, because I don't want to be the game developer all the time. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, it would be fun to make a mod and to create a unique item. But at the same time, I want to be selfish and experience it as just a player, and like not picture myself placing the candles in the engine and, you know, doing all the stuff in the creator kit or whatever. But I was looking at this, comparing it to Fallout, and because I started with Elder Scrolls, I'm always going to prefer Elder Scrolls over Fallout. But there's something about like the candles and the way that it lights. It's like, it's a really cool world that Morrowind has. Skyrim has it too. And I'm really excited to see them do that in Elder Scrolls 6, is like lighting these old rooms with, you know, I think Witcher does it really well too. It's like, you know, you have the heraldry and you have the tapestries, and you're going into these, you know, guilds and all of that charm of the you know, I was playing Morrowind yesterday, and it's like they have something called skooma. I'm pretty sure that's in all the games,
Mhm.
right? Like it's like some kind of buff or whatever. And just seeing all the bottles and the jewelry, like that kind of thing is really cool that sci-fi games don't really get to have unless they go that fantasy route.
Right.
So I think it's a strength for this game.
Totally.
But,
100%.
speaking of fairy tale, have you ran into those little like I forget what they're called, but they look like fairies, fairy goblin like meets what's that cartoon gargoyle? They're like these like iron, like they look like they're made of iron or rock, and they're these little fairy dudes.
No, I have not yet, because I would know exactly what you're talking about. I saw that it was so detailed.
I was just going through it, like these little fairy buff dudes, like were in, and Mo specifically asked me, she's like, "What are those called?" And I can't remember. They had a funny name, but yeah. What do you think of the character cam, like the zooming in and seeing them talk and all of that?
I think it's part of the charm of this generation, and just Bethesda in general. I love, in a way, having fun and laughing at the juxtaposition of the voice acting with the lack of expressions on the face. They did better in Skyrim. And that they have some funny moments in that game, but I'm excited to play just to see all that, just how, because like I think one of the first missions, right, you're going to Kavlok or something, one of the towns, right, and you get sucked into the Oblivion portal and all that. And I just remember the elf coming up to tell you like, run, and he just had this blank face of like nothing's happening. But he's freaking out. Oh, you gotta get out of here! Everything's burning! And did not match his facial expression at all. So I just started busting up, of course, during that scene. And I'm excited for more of those moments.
One thing that I noticed, and I don't know if this is only because I'm playing Morrowind and Oblivion more than I'm playing Skyrim. I'll know when I play Skyrim. I will have to capture gameplay or do something, but does it feel like to you the dialogue trees are longer than what we got in Skyrim, or do you think Skyrim's conversation threads are as long? Because I've been pleasantly surprised with Morrowind specifically, like how much you can get out of people, persuading them, trying to get more info. Everything leads to it. It's almost like you're getting these lore drops in the conversations. In Oblivion, it seems like it's less than Morrowind, but it still feels like it's there.
I think it's there with certain characters, right? Because I think what they're trying to do, at least I get this sense in this game, is they're trying to launch me in this story forward, and like get me into this world as quickly as possible. And I get that because in these kind of games, there's so much jammed into them, and they do it so well though at not making you feel totally like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, like there's too much going on. They feed it to you carefully, but I immediately was reminded of how jam-packed these games are. Of like, you gifted me the deluxe edition, so as soon as I got out of the tutorial zone, new quest, and I'm like. And it's like assuming like I'm already like a badass warrior, and I'm not.
That's hilarious.
I'm completely reminded of like how much there is in this game, and I like ignored all those quests, and I was like, I need to just like beeline for the story. This is my first time, and I can totally see how they set up with the tutorial and the story with the Emperor that they want to get me into this world as quickly as possible and teach me some things through those missions. So that's where I'm at. I've been just doing like the main missions.
Okay, that's cool. That's really good to know. Yeah, because do you get the guilt when... Because there's always that balance. I just beat Unicorn Overlord, and I'm always thinking about this now. It was like, I put 80 hours into it, 80 or 90 hours. Yeah, it's a beefy RPG. It's super addicting. But it makes you think like, okay, before I do the main quest, should I do a couple things to level up, right? Like, so I'm not going under leveled. But then this game has enemy scaling. So this will be another episode. This is just me going off script for a second. But like the enemy scaling makes me go, is it better that I just beeline it, maybe get a lot of gear, but like, do you really want to get super strong if your enemies just get stronger, you know, or get as strong? So does that encourage you to beeline it? But then at the same time, I struggle with this when I meet a character and they're like, the Oblivion gate closed, we need to quickly go do this. And I'm like, I need to sleep because I need to level up. I always feel bad being like, hold on, wait, I'm not ready. Because the people pleaser in me always wants to be like, I'm ready now, let's go. And then I show up. This happens in Fallout 4 all the time. I show up and I'm like, okay, I have a pipe pistol with 12 rounds. I have like my favorite shotgun with 3 shells. I have 4 grenades and I have like 3 stim packs. And I'm already almost dead. And I'm starting a whole DLC, you know, or whatever, just because I felt guilt of being like, oh, hold on, let me just leave you here, NPC, stranded in this dire situation. I'm going to go to a totally different town, do a bunch of other stuff, and like leave you here when I feel like it breaks immersion, but it also makes me feel bad. Does that happen to you? Or do you just go like, oh, you could sit and wait. The Empire can wait for me. I'm going to go dick around for 20 hours or whatever.
No, I feel what you feel. But for me, like when I play a game for the first time, I try my best I try my hardest to just like not take my character so seriously. And that's the beautiful thing about the Joker, my character, is I'm not going to take it so seriously where I'm going to feel that anxiety, because I get that anxiety too of like, I'm role playing right now. I can't just leave. I gotta do this hard battle now, right? But as that you play through that first playthrough and make those mistakes, I become obsessive about perfect replays, you know, perfect second playthroughs. Like now that I know this game, I know exactly what kind of character I want to be, what I want to do, and now this is like my for real playthrough. So I don't know if anyone else does that, like their second playthrough, or like the other thing I do is sometimes I can't even bear to beat the whole game without having that good playthrough. So I like have like a couple playthroughs that are only to the halfway point, and then I, you know, pick like, this is the playthrough that I'm going to take to the end because I liked how this one played out more. So that's where my perfectionism comes in. Before starting the channel, my rule was always just play it for the story, because you don't want to get spoilers. Right. Like if my friends are talking about it, I want to know what happens in the story. And now I go for we have all these different ways to talk about games, so I could kind of frame it differently, you know? So the way I'm framing this game, particularly in this playthrough, is try to experience the story as linearly as possible, so that way you and I are having a similar experience, like reading a book. Right. But then also sneaking off and like analyzing the UI and analyzing some of the lore for more videos. So it's good because it forces me to slow down more than I normally would. Like like most creatives probably have ADHD, and I just want to, like you said, just click, and then get the sword, go in the dungeon, get the loot, go to the next thing. But I do become more immersed when I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a video about just this book that I just found. Totally. And so I'm reading it, and then I do get more immersed. So it's a hybrid of what you just described for me with this playthrough and doing like the Yetti Den playthrough, where I kind of need to go deeper than I normally would. So I have more opportunities to talk with the community about stuff. And I'm not like, stuff isn't just flying over my head, you know? So, but when I was young, I just did the main quest as much as I could, because I learned from Morrowind that I would kill the NPCs and the quest givers and break all these quest lines. So I've learned like just try to keep everything intact so you can experience it and know what's actually going on. That's cool. So, yeah. Very similar.
Well, thank you guys for watching us talk about the art direction and a little bit more than that. So overall, Matt, you would say that you're starting to be wooed and swooned by Oblivion a little bit more than initially expected.
Yeah, I'm starting to appreciate it. You know, here's some other games that came out that year that I was like kind of comparing them to. So like games like Bully, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, we got Saints Row, Tomb Raider Legend, and then like something more artistic like Okami, Yeah, and then we have like movie games like Pirates of the Caribbean, Black Pearl. It looks like.
Oh wait.
And Guitar Hero 2. So the graphics weren't like too much of a crazy thing at this point. I do think games like Legend of Zelda had more of a better idea of their art direction. Like it was more of an idea, and a good secure kind of brand and look. They were building off of Ocarina of Time, and I think like we were mentioning with Bethesda though, with Morrowind for the previous games, it looks like they were definitely having each game have its more unique feel and atmosphere, and they definitely have more of like a ladder, like stepping stones. Like they're trying to build something and make it better every time. So yeah, I think overall visually it's cool. If they were trying to go for that Sleeping Beauty fantasy fairy tale look, I got that. So I think they did very well. Do I wish that they had a little bit more of the cooler fairy tale designs and not as ugly, I guess, with the main characters, the NPCs? Yes, I wish it was a little bit more. Maybe they dived deeper into their charm, like Legend of Zelda.
Vanillaware. Yeah, Legend of Zelda, or even Vanillaware, who does Unicorn Overlord. Like they have fantasy games with really strong character design, and it's like that comic book. Like, could this person designing characters go into comic books? And I want to say, is it Todd McFarlane, the creator of Spawn? He was attached to Kingdoms of Amular, the game that we keep talking about. So I think there's a value when you have that comic book gravitas to your character design. You know, that's why people want to rewatch X-Men 1997. It's like they love those designs.
Yeah, the design. And you can I like that you're playing as an elf in Oblivion, because I feel like you see more of what they were going for with design when you look at the elves. They look more unique. They look more like artistic in a way, a certain take on what an elf would look like in this kind of world. So I see what they're doing, but that didn't translate well for the more human like races. I felt everyone looked pretty basic in comparison to the elves. So I think they did a much better job at showing the human races, their defining features in Skyrim. And that makes me excited to see the art direction. Hopefully it has that same charm, and they kind of lean in onto those differences in the next Elder Scrolls.
Right. Yeah, going back to playing Morrowind, I was looking more carefully. I'm like, I really think that it was a little bit of a step down, because Morrowind is very jagged looking when it comes to the character designs, but they have an aesthetic. It's like, I love the way the orcs look, and I love the way the elves look. Like, Morrowind has a more distinct character design, I think, than Oblivion did. And I just think it's like what we're talking about with the AI. It's just like they had all these radiant AI systems for Oblivion. And so a lot of it was kind of the plus and minuses of technology, being like, oh, we have all this new tech we could use, but not really having enough time to it's like all brain, no heart. And it's like, if they would have waited just a little bit more and just be like, I know we have that tech, but let's sit on it for a second. Let's design this as we get that tech to look a little bit more artistic. Right. Well, for reals this time. Thank you guys for watching. Matt, where can they follow you?
You can find me on YouTube or Instagram at JumbyJumbwa, JumbyJumbwa. Don't forget that bois at the end, baby.
And you're already on my channel, the Yetti Den, so just hit subscribe, leave us a comment, and play Oblivion and share your thoughts with us, because
play it with us.
More people should play these games. So anyways, we will see you guys next time. Later. Bye.
Peace.